My name is Marlo, 36 years old. Once a wife who believed she had buried her husband 3 years ago after a fire destroyed both our home and our life. But that night, in the grand lobby of a Chicago hotel, as the lights shone straight onto the stage, I saw him. Colton stood there, dressed in an elegant suit, smiling as he slipped a ring onto the finger of a young woman in a secret wedding ceremony. My chest tightened. 3 years of grief, living with memories and loss, only to discover he was still alive, starting a new life where I didn't exist. Have you ever been betrayed so deeply that even the death of the person you loved turned out to be a lie? Leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe so I can tell you the full truth behind that wedding. A story no one could have predicted. 3 years earlier, my life had been so peaceful I sometimes thought it would last forever. We lived in a small town on the edge of the Oregon woods, where every morning smelled of freshly roasted coffee drifting through Main Street, where people knew each other's names and still greeted you even if you only passed for a moment. Our cafe, Cedar Steam, sat on the corner beneath the branches of an old maple tree. Colton and I had opened it with the savings from our early years of marriage. He worked the counter, his hands gliding over the espresso machine like an artist playing a familiar piece. I handled the tables, chatted with customers, and sometimes helped him test new recipes. Colton always said, "One day we'll have a whole chain. One shop in every state, each with a little corner of Oregon." I thought he was dreaming, but deep down I believed he could make it happen. Colton was the kind of man everyone liked. Thoughtful, always helping neighbors and never forgetting to bring me a bunch of wildflowers when I'd had a rough day. That winter was colder than usual. Snow covered the narrow streets, and every night we could hear the wind sweeping across the porch. I remember that night clearly, the night that erased everything I had ever had. We closed the cafe earlier than usual because a snowstorm was on its way. Colton said he'd stay behind in the garage to check the pipes and the heater, while I went home to make dinner. Our house was only a few blocks from the shop, a 2-story wooden home we had restored together over the summers. Close to midnight, I woke to the smell of burning and a sharp crack like wood splitting apart. When I rushed into the hallway, orange-red light danced across the ceiling. The fire had started in the kitchen, spreading so fast I couldn't understand what was happening. I called for Colton, but he wasn't in the house. A neighbor pounded on the door, pulling me outside while I fought to go back in. The fire swallowed the roof in minutes. By the time the fire trucks arrived, the house was a giant torch. They found the remains of a body near the basement stairs, where Colton kept his repair tools. DNA tests later confirmed it was him. Years later, investigators would call those results compromised. An unidentified cadaver, a swapped sample, and a coroner who never answered for his shortcuts. The police concluded it was caused by faulty wiring in the heating system. They said he had probably run downstairs to shut off the power but got trapped. On the day of the funeral, our small town seemed to slow down. Cafe regulars brought cards and flowers, saying he was a good man taken too soon. I stood beside the closed casket, my hands ice cold, unable to believe that the man who once made me a cappuccino every morning was now a name carved into stone. After the funeral, I lost everything, not my husband but our home, our cafe, and the future we had imagined. The insurance covered part of it, but I quickly realized the mortgage debt and past repair cost had eaten most of it away. Colton's mother said she took the remaining amount to handle legal matters. I believed her then, but the records I would later obtain showed otherwise. The town felt suffocating. Every street, every corner cafe reminded me of Colton. I moved into a small month-to-month rental apartment, but every night I woke from nightmares, sure I'd heard his footsteps in the hall. One spring morning when the snow had begun to melt, I went back to the cafe just to see it one last time. The glass door still bore the name, but inside there were only bare wooden frames. I stayed there a while before realizing I couldn't keep living among the fragments of my past. I decided to leave Oregon, taking only a few boxes and our wedding album. Chicago greeted me with noisy streets, tall buildings, and the anonymity I thought I needed. I got a job at an event planning company, starting from scratch, trying to forget the man I believed was dead. But over the years, there was still a small part of me that feared I might see that face in a crowd. And I didn't know what I would do if it actually happened. Then, 3 years later, it did in a way no one could have imagined. A year after Colton passed, I had grown used to my new rhythm in Chicago, though there were still holes in my life that couldn't be filled. I no longer opened the cafe every morning, Nobody asked what I wanted to drink before starting the day. My life revolved around event contracts, busy schedules, and quiet evenings in my 11th floor apartment. One Monday morning in March, the sky was gray and mist clung to the windows. I had come back from the supermarket when I saw a small package on my doorstep. No postage, no return address. Only my name handwritten on plain white paper. I carried it to the kitchen and set it on the table. A chill ran down my spine as I opened it. Inside was a dark blue velvet box, the kind used for jewelry. When I lifted the lid, I almost dropped it. The necklace. There was no mistaking it. The delicate silver chain with a gold maple leaf pendant Colton had given me for our 5th wedding anniversary. The back of the leaf was engraved with 3 words, "To my March." I had thought it was destroyed in the fire along with everything else. Underneath it was a small card with only 2 words, "I'm sorry." My hands trembled. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I eased into a chair, forcing myself to breathe slowly to keep from fainting. Part of me wanted to believe this was a cruel prank. But how could it be? That necklace had never left our home before the fire. I grabbed my phone and called the police. My voice was still shaky as I explained. The officer on the line sighed. "Ma'am, this could be a prank by someone who knows about your past. We'll make a note of it, but without a sender's address, it'll be hard to trace." "But how would they have gotten this necklace?" I pressed, clinging to the hope they'd take it seriously. "They could have found it at the old property or bought it somewhere. Without more evidence, we can't open an investigation." I hung up, the feeling of abandonment washing over me again, like when I'd stood watching our home burn, no one able to save Colton. That night, I placed the necklace on my desk, staring at it like it was a message from the past. "I'm sorry." Sorry for what? For leaving me? For what happened? Or for lying? In the weeks that followed, I began noticing strange things. An old credit card bill with a few $100s left on it suddenly reported paid in full, though I hadn't made any payment. Then my student loan, which I'd been paying off every month, was abruptly cleared. The bank confirmed the payments came from an account that would not disclose the sender. At first, I thought maybe it was my parents, but they swore it wasn't. And there was no one else close enough to be doing this for me. One afternoon, while sorting tax documents, I remembered the insurance file from the fire. I had never reviewed the full payout records, only knew part of it went to me and the rest, over $1 million, was said by Colton's mother to be used for legal matters. I called the insurance company and requested a complete copy of the file. A few days later, a thick envelope arrived. I flipped through the pages and then I saw it. A transfer record for the full payout, $1.2 million, into a federal account, dated just 3 days after the police ruled Colton's death. The recipient? Not his mother. Not me. But a name I had never heard before, Ethan Ross. I set the file down, my mind swirling with questions. Who was Ethan Ross? And why had my home insurance payout gone to him? I searched online. No clear information, a few vague mentions of a man on the East Coast matching Colton's description. The gnawing unease pushed me to contact the police again, giving them the new information. But they told me, "Ma'am, if you want a deeper investigation, you should hire a private investigator." That night, I lay in bed, clutching the necklace, listening to the rain hitting the window. For the past year, I had tried to believe I had buried the past. But all these signs, the necklace, the card, the disappearing debts, and especially the insurance money, were like invisible hands pulling me back toward the truth I feared most. Colton might never have died. And if he was still alive, then all this time I had been living inside one massive lie. I took the insurance file to see Colton's mother one early summer morning, when the sun had risen and dew still clung to the wooden fence around her house. She opened the door, her expression barely surprised to see me. "What is it now, Marlo?" I set the file down on the kitchen table, sliding out the pages to reveal the $1.2 million and the signature of someone named Ethan Ross. "Do you know who this is?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She glanced at it, then lifted her coffee cup as if she couldn't care less. "I don't know. And I don't want to know. Colton is gone. You should learn to accept that instead of clinging to baseless theories." But this signature, the money disappeared 3 days after, I choked on the words. After they said they found him. She looked me straight in the eye, her gaze cold as steel. "You need to stop, Marlo. You're making yourself look like a woman who doesn't know how to let go." I walked out of that house feeling as if someone had slammed the last door in my face. From that day on, Colton's mother stopped answering whenever I called. My texts went ignored. Not her, the rest of his family turned their backs too. They told neighbors I refused to accept reality, that I was obsessed to the point of madness. The rumors spread faster than I expected. Some old friends began to distance themselves, and then I overheard whispers that I had blown through the insurance payout on frivolous things. Someone even said it to my face in the grocery store. "You should be ashamed, Marlo. People lose their husbands and mourn. You on the other hand." I walked away before they could finish. But their words clung to me like the smell of smoke in my hair, impossible to wash out. I began to withdraw. No more morning coffee with neighbors, no more nights out with friends. Every time I stepped into town, I felt the stares, heard the whispers behind my back. The small town that had once been home now felt like a sealed cage, crammed with memories and judgment. When my short-term apartment lease ended, I decided to leave. I sold what was left. A few old pieces of furniture, the tea set my mother gave me on my wedding day, even the armchair Colton used to sit in to read the paper. Each item sold felt like cutting away a piece of myself, but I knew I had to if I wanted to survive. Chicago wasn't a place I had ever imagined settling, but it had what I needed most then: anonymity. Here no one knew me as the young grieving widow, no one cared about my past. I found a small apartment on the 11th floor, looking out over a busy street where neon lights spilled across the windows each night. At first, the city noise kept me awake. Car horns, laughter from the bar downstairs. But eventually it became a lullaby because none of it carried a voice speaking Colton's name. I got a job at an event planning company. At first, it was a temporary position handling logistics for conferences, but the work was so busy it left me no time to think about anything else. One afternoon, while I was arranging tables for a seminar, a coworker named Jenna asked, "Marlo, do you have family here?" "No, it's only me." "Then you're lucky you've got us," Jenna said with a smile, not asking anything more. It was that lack of curiosity that made me feel lighter. I began working more, even taking weekend shifts. Not for the money, but because every hour in the office was an hour I didn't have to face the questions in my head about Ethan Ross or the necklace. Still, on late nights when I came home, switched on the warm yellow light, I would see my reflection in the window, thinner, with darker circles under my eyes, but with a gaze that had hardened. I was cutting ties with the past, but I was also cutting away parts of myself. One autumn evening, as I was clearing my desk, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I hear you're looking for Ethan Ross." So, no one in Chicago knew about this, except me. I deleted the message, but I didn't sleep that night. In the weeks that followed, I got more texts like it. Sometimes warnings, sometimes taunts. I didn't reply, and I didn't go to the police. My time in Oregon had taught me that sometimes people won't protect you, unless you protect yourself first. I slowly learned to live with the silence. Not telling anyone. Not looking for more. But the truth was still there, like a knife hidden under cloth. You can pretend not to see it, but it can still cut you anytime. And I knew, even after moving to a new city and cutting everyone off, I hadn't truly escaped Colton. Because until I knew everything he had done, he still held a piece of my life. The moment I saw Colton at that party, my heart clenched, but my mind was strangely clear. If I stormed in and shouted in front of hundreds of people, I'd earn nothing but doubtful looks and whispers about my sanity. He was too skilled at crafting a narrative, and I had learned the hard way. If you want to unmask a liar, you need proof in the right timing. From the edge of the ballroom, champagne glass near my lips but untouched, I kept my eyes locked on Colton. The lights caught his face. No trace of the disabled man I had once pushed in a wheelchair. I slipped my phone from my purse, snapping shot after shot. When he turned to smile at the bride, I switched to video, capturing every detail. The way he descended a few steps, the way his hand fit naturally and firmly around the woman's waist. I left while the wedding was still underway, melting into the crowd of arriving guests. Nobody noticed the woman in a simple black dress heading straight for the parking lot. In my car, I replayed the video, hands unsteady but gaze fixed on the screen. There was no doubt. Colton was alive, starting a new life as if I had never existed. The next day, I sat in a small cafe near my office, laptop open, searching for any coverage of last night's event. On a local news site, I found a short article. Bradley Hale, prominent real estate developer, hosts private anniversary and engagement party for his daughter, Amelia Hale. The photo showed Bradley beside his daughter, but I recognized the tall man in the background wearing a navy suit. Colton, though now he used another name. I needed someone with experience, someone immune to emotion. One name came to mind, Reese Turner, a private investigator a coworker had mentioned during her divorce. I called him that afternoon. "I need to investigate someone," I said as soon as he answered. "But this person was declared dead 3 years ago." A pause, then his voice. "Sounds like a story I should hear in full. Can you come to my office at 6 p.m.? Reese's office sat on the second floor of an old building, the sign small but neat. He was in his 40s, tall, with graying hair and the calm eyes of someone who'd heard too many lies. I handed him the photos and video from last night, along with copies of the old insurance documents. He studied them, then looked up. "If this really is the same man, he's pulled off a sophisticated plan. What do you want me to find first?" "Everything. New identity, where he lives, what he does," and I hesitated. "If anyone's helping him." Reese opened his notebook. "I'll start with public records and the connections around Mr. Bradley Hale. Last night's party wasn't open to anyone. He may be moving in a closed circle." Over the next days I kept working at the event planning company, but my mind stayed on Bradley Hale. In a few weeks, our company would handle a major real estate conference, where Bradley was the keynote speaker. At the prep meeting, I volunteered for VIP guest reception. On the conference day, I wore a sharp suit pinned on my badge and greeted guests in the main lobby. When Bradley walked in with 2 assistants, I extended my hand. "Welcome to the conference, Mr. Hale. I'm Marlo, in charge of VIP reception." He shook my hand, polite but brief. His eyes carried the quick calculation of a man used to seeing hundreds of faces each week. During the break, I brought coffee to the speaker's lounge. Bradley sat at a round table mid-conversation. I set the cup in front of him and said quietly, "This is Ethiopia Yurgachev, very popular in Oregon." He looked up, slightly surprised. "You're from Oregon?" "Yes, a small town. I used to own a cafe there." Kept my tone light. That small exchange was enough for him to remember me. In event planning, a few encounters could put you on the trusted list. A week later, Bradley called our company, requesting that I coordinate an upcoming charity gala he was hosting. I agreed without hesitation. This was my opening to get closer to Colton. Meanwhile, Reese sent his preliminary report. He'd found financial documents tied to a shell company in Delaware under the name Ethan Ross, the same from the insurance file. From that account, multiple transfers had gone to a new real estate investment fund where Bradley was a major shareholder. I stared at the relationship chart Reese sent, each line linking names, companies, and bank accounts. Reese's chart came from public filings and a whistleblower packet tied to the shell company. The pieces were fitting together. Colton hadn't faked his death for the payout. He'd used it to wedge his way into the real estate world through Bradley Hale. On the phone, Reese warned, "If you're going to confront him, be ready. A man like this, cornered, won't hesitate to fight dirty." That evening, a knock pounded urgently at my door. I opened it to find Darlene, Colton's mother. The proud, cold air she once carried was gone, replaced by a gaunt face, disheveled silver hair, and dark circles. "We need to talk," she said, voice hoarse. She sank into a chair. I poured her water. Her hands trembled as she lifted the glass. "I saw him, Colton." I forced my tone steady. "Are you sure? Not someone who—" "I'm his mother, Marlo," she cut in. "I know his walk, the tilt of his head when he smiles, the habit of slipping his hand into the left coat pocket. I was at the North Marina in Portland waiting for an old friend. He stepped off a white yacht, no cane, no wheelchair. 3 well-dressed men with him. One was an attorney from a major real estate firm in Portland. I remembered when she'd taken his side, telling me to let go. Why are you telling me this now?" She slid a thick file from her bag. "The bank sent me a foreclosure notice. I didn't know when Colton mortgaged my house. The file shows the loan was signed in his name, using a forged ID and a fraudulent power of attorney, after he was declared dead." I frowned. "That's illegal." "I know. But I can't afford a lawyer. I believed he was dead, completely. Now I've lost my home while he lives well on stolen money." She pushed the file toward me. "You're the only one who can help." I know I treated you terribly before, but I have no one else. The bank statements detailed mortgage loans and transfers to names on Reese's list, shell companies, real estate funds. In my mind it all clicked. Those transfers led straight to the fund Colton used with Bradley Hale. If I could trace the money, every act of fraud would be exposed. What do you want me to do? Help me get my house back, she said, voice breaking, and if possible, bring Colton to justice. Part of me wanted to refuse. But seeing her, angry, scared, left behind, made me realize she was a victim too. We need to be smart, I said. No one can know you're involved. Thank you, Marlo. When the door closed, I gripped my bag. Inside was a trove of evidence Colton never imagined I'd hold. This time I wasn't only doing it for me. Months later, on a late autumn afternoon, Colton and Amelia Hale's official wedding took place in the sprawling grounds of Bradley's estate. Rows of white chairs sat under blazing red maples, golden light spilling across the aisle. Everything was elegant, extravagant, the kind of affair only a family with no budget limits would throw. I arrived more than an hour early, wearing not the black dress from before but a deep blue gown, hair in a neat bun. I didn't want attention, until the moment I needed it. Reese was already in position as catering staff, a tiny camera hidden in his shirt button, lens aimed at the altar. We had prepared every detail. In my bag were the insurance file, transfer records, photos of Colton at the marina, and the secret wedding video from the hotel. Another USB drive had already been passed to the sound technician so that, on my signal, all images and audio would appear on the massive screen behind the officiant. I sat in the last row, blending into the crowd. Bradley greeted business partners, smiling, unaware his future son-in-law was a man who had staged his own death. Music began to play, and Amelia appeared on her father's arm, her face radiant beneath the white veil. I studied Colton, or Ethan Ross, standing at the altar. Same posture, straight back, enough of a smile, eyes full of confidence as if nothing could touch him. The ceremony unfolded as planned. I listened to each word from the officiant, my heartbeat steady like counting down. From the right-hand side, Reese tilted his head slightly, our signal. Then came the familiar question, sharp as a blade. If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace. I rose. The scrape of my chair against the stone floor seemed louder than it should, turning heads. I walked into the aisle, my voice calm but carrying across the crowd. I object. Gasps rippled. The officiant faltered. Amelia turned to Colton, confusion clouding her expression. For a split second, panic flashed in his eyes, then the practiced smile returned. And you are? Bradley asked, his tone caught between courtesy and caution. I'm his legal wife, I said, holding Colton's gaze. And he is not Ethan Ross. His real name is Colton Avery, a man who faked his death 3 years ago to collect $1.2 million in insurance money, abandoning me and his family before vanishing. A wave of noise swept the guests. Colton gave a short, dismissive laugh. This is a mistake. She clearly needs help. I opened my bag, pulled out the thick file and handed it to Bradley. These are copies of the insurance documents, the transfer records from the shell company under the name Ethan Ross to the investment fund you're partnered with. And this, I held up my phone, is a video of his secret wedding to Amelia just months ago while he was hiding his identity. On the massive screen behind the officiant, the hotel footage appeared, Colton and Amelia in the ballroom, every gesture unmistakable. His laugh echoed through the speakers. Amelia stepped back, bouquet clutched like a lifeline. Bradley's face drained from red to pale as he scanned the documents. Colton or Ethan, explain yourself, he said, voice heavy. Colton tried to step down from the altar, but Reese moved in, feigning a microphone adjustment to block his path. I stepped forward. How do you explain mortgaging your mother's house after you were declared dead? Or using the insurance payout, the money paid for your death, to buy a yacht and a beachfront condo? Darlene, standing to the right, came forward, fury in her voice. It's all true. I saw him at the marina. I'm his mother. I know exactly who he is. Colton scanned the crowd for an escape, but the eyes on him had changed. No trust left, only suspicion and anger. Bradley tightened his grip on the documents, then signaled security. Get him out. And call the police. Colton resisted, but Reese held his ground until 2 guards closed in and escorted him out. Amelia fled inside, her veil trailing like a torn ribbon. The adrenaline still surged in me. Whispers faded into a heavy silence, the kind that comes when truth tears through ceremony. I stayed in place, gripping the file I had spent years securing. Bradley approached, shock and anger etched into his face. "I don't know what to say. You've saved my family from a con I never saw coming. I wasn't looking for thanks." From the right, Darlene stepped closer, eyes red but steady. "Call the police now. He has to be arrested today, Marlo. Don't let him get away again." I remembered Darlene from 3 years ago, cold, siding with her son. Now she stood trembling with rage at his betrayal. "I won't let him get away," I said evenly. "But I'm not turning this into a spectacle just to humiliate him in front of everyone. He'll face what he's done, in court where it belongs." Reese returned, handing me a large envelope. "All the original evidence is planned. I've contacted an FBI agent I trust. They'll take it tonight. I want to be a witness. I'll have my lawyer coordinate with you," Darlene added, giving my hand a brief squeeze, part apology, part gratitude. We left the estate as the gathering splintered into uneasy groups. Amelia didn't reappear and I didn't blame her. Some truths are too heavy to absorb in an afternoon. In the car, Reese asked, "You okay?" "I'm not sure I'd call it okay. But once this envelope is in the FBI's hands, Colton won't be able to run anywhere." "That's what matters," Reese said with a faint smile. We reached the federal office after nightfall. Special Agent Ramirez, Reese's contact, met us in a small conference room. He reviewed the documents, then looked at me. "If everything here checks out, we're talking about multiple serious charges. Federal insurance fraud, money laundering, identity fraud. Are you prepared to be the primary witness?" "I've waited 3 years for this moment." He signaled a staff member to take the file. Signing the handover felt like putting down a weight I'd carried too long. Outside, the night wind carried the scent of dry leaves and coffee from the corner cafe. I took a deep breath, letting the cold fill my lungs. "You know," I said, "I thought I'd feel triumphant. But really I feel light." "That's a good sign," Reese replied. "It means you've gotten through the hardest part." I believed him. Colton would face the consequences and I would no longer be bound to that name. Colton's sentencing came on a spring morning. I sat in the gallery between Reese and Darlene as the judge read each charge. Clear, deliberate, leaving no doubt. Defendant Colton Avery is sentenced to 18 years in federal prison for insurance fraud, money laundering, and identity fraud. Full restitution of $1.2 million plus interest and court costs. The gavel struck. Colton didn't look my way, but I saw his shoulders slump. What I felt wasn't victory, it was closure. Months later, restitution arrived in installments from liquidated assets and shell companies. I didn't keep the money. I had known for a long time what I wanted to do. I called a lawyer and began creating the New Light Fund, a nonprofit to support victims of financial fraud committed by family or romantic partners. A place for legal resources, counseling, and, if needed, someone to stand beside them when they chose to speak out. For the opening day, we rented a small office on the 3rd floor of a red brick building by the river. The space was bright, walls hung with photographs of Oregon landscapes. A reminder that the past can still leave something beautiful if you choose the parts you keep. Reese was the first to arrive, carrying a wooden sign with the fund's name carved into it. He set it on the reception desk and smiled. "This isn't your new job, Marlo. It's your statement. You've gone further than anything Colton ever did to you." I smiled back. "A real one. You'll join me in this, right? If you can stand me for a few more years," he said, half joking. Reese became the fund's official investigative partner, leading the unit that gathered and verified information, connecting with private investigators in multiple states. Every case, big or small, was handled with care. In the first month we took on 6. A woman in Ohio whose son borrowed in her name to open a store, but used the money to pay gambling debts. A veteran in Texas whose cousin forged his signature for a loan. A teacher in Florida whose boyfriend drained her retirement account and vanished. I'll never forget Helen, 72, from Minnesota. Her daughter had used joint account privileges to empty her savings. When she called the fund, her voice trembled. "I know she's my blood, but I don't deserve to be treated like this." I flew to Minnesota, joined her in the meeting with a local attorney, and when the paperwork was finalized, she gripped my hand. Thank you for believing me when my own family didn't. Some nights, Reese and I stayed late at the office, the desk lamp casting light over stacks of case files. The more we do this, he said, leaning back, the more I realize how many people live through this in silence. They think being conned by someone they love is shameful, I told him. I want them to know it's not. We began expanding into neighboring states. I traveled more, met more people, and in each story I saw a reflection of my past self. Lost, doubting, afraid. The difference was now I could hand them a way out. One autumn afternoon, Reese dropped an envelope in front of me. Anonymous donation. $50,000. Inside was a check and a slip of paper. Use this to keep the light for those who think they've lost everything. I didn't know the sender, but I smiled. Maybe there are still people who believe helping others is the best use of money. Every morning I pass the wooden sign from opening day. The words aren't the name of an organization. They're proof that from being a victim, I became a guide for those lost in the darkness I once knew. Colton may have taken 3 years from me. The rest of my life, I'll use to bring justice to far more people than that. On the morning of our grand opening in the new Florida office, sunlight poured through wide glass windows, streaking the floor with gold. The faint scent of fresh paint mingled with the aroma of coffee from the small kitchen. Bouquets sent from across the country stood on the reception desk in tall glass vases. I was reviewing the guest list when Lainey, our receptionist, came in holding a brown envelope. This was sent for you, no sender's name. Inside was a large photograph. Colton, hair longer, in a t-shirt and jeans, hands cuffed, stepping off a customs vessel. Behind him, a ship flew the American flag. I recognized the Miami commercial port, famous for smuggling busts. No gloating. Just confirmation that everything he tried to hide had finally been dragged into the light. Reese glanced at the photo. Looks like he tried a high-stakes game in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or maybe his fire of lies finally burned through its last fuel, I said, setting it down. In the meeting room, our young team was taping posters, arranging chairs, adjusting name tags. From the doorway, I took in the room, remembering every face we'd helped. People who came in with uncertainty and left with a plan. Everyone, I said, before the guests arrive, I want to say a few words. They turned toward me. No one here deserves to disappear from their own story. No matter what you've been through, you have the right to stand up and write a different ending. Lainey smiled. I think I know what that feels like. I used to think I was a side character in someone else's story, until I started working here. I thanked her with a look. Reese leaned against the doorway, silent but agreeing. The event began. Lawyers, journalists, past collaborators, former clients, they all came. In the middle of it, Darlene arrived in a navy dress, healthier and more confident than the day she'd shown up at my door in Chicago. She hugged me briefly. I heard about the photo, she said. Maybe this really is the end. Maybe. But what matters is we didn't let him take anything more from us. By the end of the day, after most guests had left, I sat in the meeting room. The photo of Colton at the dock lay on the table. I slipped it into a file, not to dwell on pain, but to remember that the road here was paved with courage. Mine, Darlene's, and everyone who believed me. Reese walked in with 2 cups of coffee. You know, he said, I think this is just the beginning. Exactly. Once the truth finds its way into the light, nothing can put it out. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, I knew, the fire I thought had died the day Colton vanished was burning brighter than ever. All of us faced that crossroads, whether to nurse the wound or let it forge our strength. I chose forward because revenge can give you a moment of satisfaction, but healing gives you peace that lasts. And what about you? Would you let a past betrayal hold you back, or turn it into a flame to light the way for others? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you want more real stories about family, marriage, and finding yourself again, subscribe so you won't miss what's next.